Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So Tarek and we're continuing series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and it's been about 48 hours since I brought you a Nintendo 64 FPGA core update, and you know that means Robert FPGA Zoom Spots has updated the core not once but twice in that time frame, and we have a lot more games to show you today. If we're getting too far involved, then do me a huge favor, down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. But if you can't tell already, GoldenEye is now working in the current core, but it is not working perfectly. This is still work in progress, so temper your expectations and realize that while you can play GoldenEye today, it is definitely going to freeze on you at some point in time. But this is obviously the first level from the game, and it is running on the current core, and it's running at a relatively decent frame right now. Do keep in mind that GoldenEye and the Nintendo 64 hardware was definitely not running at 60 frames per second. I would have to check this against original hardware to see how close we are to that right now, but this looks, feels, and kind of sounds like just real GoldenEye with lack of any issues whatsoever until it actually freezes. And you'll see here with all of the different zoom techniques, all of those bullet gunshot effects, it is drawing all the graphics as we would expect, and I don't really see any sort of graphical glitches. There's that little weird line on the dam there, but I do remember that some of those polygons like to clip into the wall on original hardware as well. But as we move further into the game, it is just GoldenEye, and that is so spectacular to see. When people think N64 hardware, this is one of the first games that pops to everyone's mind, because it is literally probably one of the games that absolutely every single Nintendo 64 owner back in the day had a copy of. Everyone I knew when I was a kid who had this console had Mario 64 and GoldenEye, and everything else after that was left up to chance as to what they would want to collect. But you'll see here with the sniper rifle as well, one thing about GoldenEye is it definitely takes a minute to get used to playing it again if you haven't in a while, because it is Nintendo 64 first-person controls, so do be aware of that. And big thanks to Andy D here for helping with the capture this week. But as we move further into the level, everything seems to be working totally good. The sound is good, the sound effects are there, the enemies are drawing. It is the GoldenEye gameplay that you know and expect. And you'll see here again, even at a distance, all of those little effects for the bullet holes as you shoot the sniper rifle are drawing correctly on screen. So pretty much all of the effects are in line here as to what you would expect on real hardware. And this is definitely a game that I will check back in on every single time Robert releases a new core and notates this, because previously you could only get into game with a very special version of the game, and you had to do a lot of trickery to get in there, and it would run at like 2 to 4 frames per second. Now anyone can start testing this. You may have to beat the A button like it owes you money to actually get into the damn level so it doesn't crash at the menu, but once you get in game, it's going to be running perfectly smoothly until it stops running its entirely, which I will show you in just a moment. But again, I love following along with these updates. It's only been like a week since GoldenEye even started booting on the core, and we are now at this level of progress. But of course, there's no timeline on when the next core may come. It might be a day, it might be a week, I might be redoing this video tomorrow. We just don't know with Robert. He fixes things in the order in which they interest him, so this might be how GoldenEye is for a month or for a day. We will find out. But you'll see here as we enter the dam towards the back, everything still is working fine. You're not going to have any indication that this is going to start freezing on you until the freeze actually happens. Now TLB is still not 100% implemented, and there's still some games that use TLB or that virtual memory addressing system that will not boot whatsoever on the current core. Because do realize TLB is not an on-off switch. There's different implementations, different sort of pages involved. It is a much more complicated topic than I can explain in one video, but just remember, if one game runs, that doesn't mean they all will, and maybe you'll complete the dam one day, but in this instance it freezes right around here. Now moving on to another game that's been promoted to working is Turok Rage Wars. This is basically like the multiplayer version of Turok. They're kind of doing a little bit of a Quake thing here, and while I don't like it as much as the narrative-driven Turok games, it is another game on the current core that is now playable that was not playable a few days ago, and that is always great. I know a lot of people love these games, and tell me down below what your favorite Turok is. I think I asked that last time, but I didn't get a lot of answers, so give me some of that Turok knowledge. But the game has some really fun sound, and it's working super well in the core, so go ahead and listen for 45 seconds, and I'll be right back. The Turok games always had great soundtracks, and Rage Wars is no exception, but now that we've got a few more games working, I want to talk about the 4MB RAM expansion that came out later in the Nintendo 64's life. A lot of games give you the option from high and low res, and you can toggle that here in Rage Wars on the fly. Some games make you pick it up front. Most games that utilize that 4MB RAM expansion for high resolution mode are going to slow the frame rate down because of it. The CPU will get a little bit bottlenecked, and you're going to end up with a lower frame rate. So if you notice a game isn't running as fast as you remember it from back in the day, perhaps you didn't have that 4MB RAM expansion pack actually installed and you were just running the game in low res mode. That is definitely something that you're going to encounter. Games like Legacy of Darkness, I do not recommend anyone play in high resolution mode. It looks a little bit better, it runs a lot worse. So just remember, especially now that we're getting some of these TLB games that can use that RAM expansion, play around with it, decide what works for you, and if you want to know if a game runs too slow, just Google the title of the game in high resolution mode and you're probably going to get a lot of reports on whether or not it's actually worth it. If you're going to play Rage Wars today on the current core, I definitely recommend you going down to low res mode. It is going to give you a better frame rate. It's definitely not going to be a lock 60. So few games on the Nintendo 64 were actually capable of doing something like that, but it does make the game better. And honestly, the high res mode, the resolution and textures aren't that much better, and I would definitely not trade them for some additional frames. But let's move on to a game that technically works and everyone keeps asking about, but I wouldn't really classify as playable, and that's going to be Gauntlet Legends. Everyone loves this game on the Nintendo 64. It is a port of the arcade version, and the arcade version is an absolute ton of fun. But you will see right off the top, while TLB is in here and you can execute the code, it is not running at full speed and it's definitely having some issues. And that is just because this portion of TLB, the implementation, how it functions, is not finished, which means that it's hitting the CPU too hard to be able to do those checks on TLB. That's going to reduce down the actual megahertz clock speed of the CPU in the core, which is going to end up with having graphical glitches and obviously a frame rate that is seconds per frame, not frames per second. But that is not an issue whatsoever. It just means the work is not done, and I'm sure this will get much better soon as Robert continues to implement TLB into the core. But this is one of those games that everyone absolutely asks about, so I would not skip it even though I wouldn't classify it as playable. And you'll see here in 2D aspects where there's not a lot being drawn onto the screen, you will get relatively close to the original frame rate. But the minute you actually get into the 3D portions, those TLB checks and the fact that they're slowing down the CPU are going to cause this to be a slideshow. But it is still forward progress, and it is good footage for me to point to in the future when this starts speeding up so you can see the side-by-side comparison. But interestingly, for as slow as this game is running visually, the sound seems to be good to my ear. So go ahead and listen for just 30 seconds and I'll be back with more games that recently started working.
Destroy generators to stop enemies.
It is interesting that the sound is not going to be as bad performance-wise as the visuals are concerned, but that is just because sound hardware is generally separate on pretty much any console you have ever played, so it's really not that surprising on a technical level that you're going to get optimal sound when you have a frame rate like this. But next time the core gets updated, if Gauntlet Legends is running faster, you'll be the first person to know. Another game that recently started working on a previous core that I haven't covered yet is Rakuga Kids from Konami. This is a 2D versus fighting game with so much charm. I absolutely love the art style in this game. I'm not saying it's a hidden gem fighting game, it's definitely a B tier effort from Konami, a developer not super known for making the best fighting games around, but it is another game that utilized TLB that has become functional as of now, and we're like 95% of the North American library playable at this current state. That is not completable, it just means you can get in game, it's running well, and you can enjoy it, and this game is added to that list. It seems like we're getting really close to having almost 100% of the North American library playable, but I'm assuming those last 5 or so games might actually take some of the longest time because they're utilizing so many different unique functions and TLB checks of the Nintendo 64 hardware. It is as likely that that takes a month as it does take a day. But talking about Rakuga Kids here, it is such a charming game, and I love that it's utilizing 2D assets. It really does look like a child's cartoon come to life. It's got those Scribble Knot vibes, and it's definitely a game, if you've never played it before, I definitely recommend you check it out, especially with a friend, as it got some Power Stone vibes to it, except it takes place on a 2D plane, not a 3D plane. You'll see some of the background is definitely rendered out of polygons. But this game just has so much charm, it's so unique, it's like a child's imagination come to life, and big thanks to Andy D here for helping with this capture. I am sure that's why he chose Andy in the game. But as we just see this drawing to the screen, this is a game that seems like it's just running at the full frame rate. I don't see any issues whatsoever. All of the shadows of the characters are drawing in real time and look correct. But if you see anything in this capture that doesn't look right, just leave me a comment down below, because I depend on your 5,000 plus sets of eyes, because I've only got the one. But if you're looking for another game that recently started working that you can play today, Rakuga Kids is definitely going to be one you should check out. I mean, it's got a person in a chicken hat. You cannot go wrong with that. Another game that is working, but be aware that this is only on a special core that Robert posted in the Nintendo 64 chat on MiSTer Discord, is Battle Tanks from 3DO. And when I say this has the most absurd story on any video game on this console, I 100% mean it. I do not know who wrote this. I do not know what was going on in their head or life that made them think this was a good idea. But basically, tank-based civil war has broken out because the government decided that they needed to remove the female population of Northern California, and then women banded together to create tank gangs. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense, but it is working. And the only reason that this is working is Robert just basically bodged this in the background to get it to pass one little check that was keeping it from executing. It is not a final fix. It's basically just a band-aid fix, but it took the game from not booting whatsoever to being 100% playable. And you'll see here all of the different cutscenes in the game. It's just such a weird trip. Definitely check it out. It's a relatively fun B- tier game. The nice thing is it has tank controls, and it's a one-time on the Nintendo 64. That makes sense because you're actually driving a tank. A lot better here than in Resident Evil 2, that is for sure. But it is a visually unique game, and outside of the absurd story that you do not understand why it's there, it's another game promoted to working. If you want to check it out, just go over to Discord and grab that core. And it does have some interesting sound as well, so go ahead and listen for 30 seconds, and I'll be back with one more game to show you guys.
Power up. Power up. Power up.
Sounds good, plays good, story's weird, and that is basically all there is to Battle Tanks. It's one of those games, it was not very well known, it wasn't that successful back on the Nintendo 64 back in the day, but it is something that you can now discover. That's the great thing about something like the MiSTer core here. You're not just going to spend your time playing Super Mario and GoldenEye, and honestly with GoldenEye freezing, you can't really spend your time much with that game yet. But there is a decent amount of Nintendo 64 library that pretty much no one ever got a chance to play, and Battle Tanks is definitely one you should check out. Just be aware that the story in it is the most nonsensical thing I have ever seen, and you kind of want to laugh at it and enjoy it at the same time, but it's kind of hard. Now moving on to one more thing, Octane here, this is his footage, has been doing some dual stick playthroughs of Star Wars Pod Racer. He's a cool dude. I'm going to leave his link to his YouTube in the description below. He's been testing Nintendo 64 games on the current core and doing some streams with some interesting control outputs, so you should definitely check that out. I'm actually going to meet him in real life soon out at Galloping Ghost because I'm helping Shmup Junkie do some pickup shots for a project he's working on, and I need a set of hands that can play some of the games while I do the actual cinematography. So if you never see me again, you know who the primary suspect is. Just check behind Galloping Ghost, look for some loose dirt. All jokes aside, Octane is a good dude, check his channel out. But that's the current situation with a Nintendo 64 core on MiSTer FPGA, and don't worry, the next time there's a fundamental core update, I will update this video, but we are running out of new games to start working, and that is absolutely amazing. It's going to be sad when I can't bring you these videos all the time, but it's going to be incredible when the core is finally buttoned up. But short of that, I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving, and I hope you're getting a good holiday season in. I'll be back with more videos throughout the week, and next time the core is updated, you'll see me again. Bye-bye.